Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. May peace and blessings be upon you all. I am an American Muslim. I'm also a Pakistani American. And as you've all heard, I'm a physician here in Connecticut. And Professor Najm is right. The identity which is dearest to me is that I'm a mother of two boys, ages 11 and 13. Unlike a lot of the people in the panel before, I'm not an expert on anything. I am, like a lot of women in this room, your everyday mom. So I wanted to start off with a short story which I think in its innocence portrays how my 11 and 13-year-old perceive their identity. We were fortunate enough to travel to Jordan in the past year and were able to spend a night in tents in the desert of Wadi Rum. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's the same majestic desert that movies like Lawrence of Arabia have been filmed in. So we got to Wadi Rum, and the tents that we rented were large enough only to accommodate two people. So my sons slept in one tent, and we slept in the tent adjacent to them. And late into the night, there was pin drop silence, and we could hear every whisper and giggle that was coming from the tent next to us. And I'm not exactly sure what started this off, but all of a sudden, we heard the Star-Spangled Banner being sung gently and fondly in the tent next to us, and it brought a smile to our faces. I'm not quite sure how much the people in the other tents appreciated it, but it made us feel warm and comfortable inside, and we slept well, and were awoken in the early hours of the morning by the sound of the azan, which is the morning call to prayer. And I can tell you from experience, there is nothing quite as beautiful as hearing the azan echoing in the desert in the morning time. We got up and got out of our tents to appreciate the spectacular beauty around us. It's breathtaking. And we all got ready for our morning prayers. And while I was preparing this talk, I realized that those few hours halfway across the world defined my son's identity so well. They are Americans, and they are Muslims, and they're extremely proud of it. Times are changing, and not all for the better, and I'm afraid that that identity, which they hold with a great degree of pride, is going to be harder to hang on to. 9/11, as we've mentioned, has changed things for us, and Faisal Shahzad, too, now has changed things for us all. It's the idiotic and atrocious actions of a few that leads to life-changing events for many. As if it's not hard enough to raise a teenager and a pre-teenage child, educating them regarding drugs and alcohol and smoking and the importance of education and hard work and making good choices, we also now have to constantly counsel and educate them about the challenges that they are going to face being Muslims in their own country. I just wanted to say that I know with a great degree of certainty that Muslim immigrants to the United States have come here with making a real choice and a conscious decision to raise their children in the United States because we feel that the values of truth and justice and equality and tolerance are best practiced here. And the United States is really the only home a lot of our children know. And they proudly and rightly so call themselves Americans. As a parent, though, I'm concerned that their identity as an American is now being questioned. And I say this because, and Professor Najm, I have an airport story. I say this only because we traveled to Egypt within the last year as well. We're travelers. And my 13-year-old, who has now just had a growth spurt and is almost as tall as his father, on passing through security was pulled aside. This is 13. And he had a greater check of his body and his baggage. And as he passed through, he came up to me and asked me, why did they pull me aside? And it's a very hard question to answer to a very patriotic young man. But the answer is simple. It's because he's a Muslim. Where fairness is supposed to be in the very fabric of our society, I'm afraid that this is going to become a privilege for some and not for others. He was being profiled. Not every 13-year-old was going to get pulled aside, and I don't think this was random. And because of this experience, on our return from Egypt, which is an 18-hour trip, I forewarned them that we may have to, our entrance may get delayed a little because their father, and now I was afraid maybe my 13-year-old may get pulled aside for questioning. And I could sense the frustration and anger in him when he said to me, "Why would they do that? I am an American. I will just tell them I'm an American." But the answer isn't that simple. I can also say with a great degree of certainty that a large number of Muslim children are taunted or bullied, and some even physically hurt at some level at their schools because of their faith. Our challenge is that our children do not speak up. They don't tell their parents because they're protecting them, and they don't speak up at school because they don't want to create a stir or draw attention to themselves. This is something that we all need to educate our children about. I belong to a wonderful and diverse town with a great school system, and I, like many of the mothers in this room, have been involved in the classroom of my children, so much so that I've been with the kids since kindergarten and know a lot of them on a first-name basis. So I was actually quite distressed when my 13-year-old, who's now just graduating from middle school, waited until almost graduation to tell me that he has actually been called a terrorist in school on a number of occasions and has been pushed around in the bus by one particular individual on a few. The sad thing is he told me not to make a big deal out of it, and I did get his permission before I got up here. So I was even more surprised when my now 11-year-old told me that if this was to ever happen to him, he would adopt the turn the other cheek policy. He said it didn't matter what people said to him, and he confidently told me that I don't care what they say about me, it doesn't make me that. And though I'm very proud of their inner strength, I was concerned. So I spoke to my husband that evening, who sat them down and told them asked them what would they do if an African American friend of theirs was called by a derogatory racial slur in front of them. And they had very clear ideas. They were appalled, and they knew how they would stop such an atrocity. So my husband gently pointed out to them that similarly, if someone calls them a terrorist, it's inappropriate and it's wrong. I feel we have to enforce a zero-tolerance policy in our schools, and we have to be vigilant of children who may be victims of bullying. Otherwise, we are going to lead to alienation and, as mentioned earlier, a marginalization of an entire, very patriotic American generation. I also don't know how many Americans sat down with their children the morning that the Times Square bomber's identity was revealed. But I, like Professor Najam and many Pakistani American parents, did have a word with my child that morning. And I didn't let him take the bus because he had told me about the incidences earlier. And on our way to school, I told him that that crazy man who tried to plant a bomb in Times Square was a Muslim. And I went on to tell him that he was of Pakistani heritage, and I can still see the expression in his eyes. He was shocked, and then he was worried, and he was angry. He was angry that someone of his heritage and faith was going to so now represent him in the media. And he didn't speak to me the whole way to school. I did make him promise not that he would tell me if anyone harassed him at school that day, and thankfully no one did. So not only as parents are we concerned in their identity as a Muslim and making sure that they stay patriotic as they are now, we actually also have to constantly strive to build their identity or pride in their being Muslims. I was raised here and in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I did my elementary school education here, and I remember my parents driving us an hour away to a small community center where families from the local